Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. I am a firm believer in we have a fire inside of us, and sometimes that fire is glowing and burning brightly. Sometimes it's reduced to a little bit of a flame, and sometimes you need a little bit of help to bring that fire back up again and really find your inner magnificence in that fire. We've got somebody that can help you do that. And today, and he works with both men and women, today we're going to focus for a little while on guys in 2023, what it means to be a man, what the perception is, what the expectations are. He's a life coach, a success coach, an educator, author, speaker, and he is back with us, Dr. Bary Fleet, on the program. Bary, welcome. How are you?
I'm well, Steve. How are you today?
Doing fantastic. Doing
It's a
great.
beautiful day here.
I'm a little apprehensive to talk about this topic about men and what we might reveal here, maybe even some personal stuff. But would you say it's harder to be a guy in today's society than it was, say, let's say 20 years ago?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There was a time when we had a script for what it meant to be a man. So just a silly example. I grew up in the South, and the high school yearbook, when they do senior superlatives, who's the most likely to succeed, who's the best looking, all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
Well, I got the most polite. But I learned, I grew up in a culture where a man knew what he was supposed to do. You respond with yes, sir, no, ma'am. When a woman walks in the room, you stand up. You always defer to the older people. You always open the door for women.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, when I would open the door for a woman, it was like she was offended, like I was giving her a message that she wasn't capable, and it was sort of condescending. And so I don't think that we have a good script for that. I also know that I hear from a lot of women, they want a man who's in touch with their emotions. But I do a thing. So I teach the university level, and I often have this conversation with my students, my female students especially. And I say, do you want a man with emotions? And they all say yes. And I said, so is it okay for a guy to cry? And they stop a little bit. And the response is, well, it's okay, as long as he doesn't cry more than I do.
All right, fair enough, I guess.
But it's like we're in a trap. The society is calling us. Are we getting a message that we're supposed to be vulnerable and open with our emotions? And then when we do, we get pushed down because you're being soft. And trying to figure out, I think for guys, where that line is between being open emotionally and vulnerable and what's acceptable. And I think we get a really mixed message there.
I agree with you 100%, Bary. And navigating it myself, it has come down to I'm just going to be me, my authentic self, and that I can't change it. If I'm going to be authentic, that's the way it's going to be. And I'm going to go with what I believe in, my morals, my beliefs, all of that. I did talk with some women. Most of my friends are girls.
Okay.
It just happened to be.
Yep.
Not that I don't have a lot of guy friends. I spent the entire weekend with a bunch of guys. We all got together reunion. But I hear from a lot of women that if they're single, a lot of people getting divorced in between transition and all that, they don't want a nice guy. They don't want a nice guy. They want a guy who's kind. Okay, well, great. How do we define that?
Right.
Now we're back to square one in terms of trying to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I hear, and I know a lot of women who are attracted to the bad guys.
Yeah.
And then they get in a mess because they get involved with bad guys.
Yeah.
But I think there's a place, obviously, to be kind, to be sensitive, but also to step up to the plate, and do the manly thing. I'm in the process of publishing my second book, and I've got a section called how to become a magnificent man. and it's 3 steps. The first step is to have a hero. I think a lot of us grew up. I know I grew up with my dad was my hero, and there were sports heroes. I was not an athlete. That was a whole other story. But I was a wannabe athlete. But there were people that I could look up to, that I could model myself after. And I think it's important for us to have those kind of models, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a coach, but somebody that we can look up to, somebody that will call us out on our stuff, somebody that will support us, but somebody that we can model ourselves after. And then I think it's important for us to be the hero. And I don't mean that in the sense of wielding power over other people, but looking at a situation and doing the thing that's going to make the situation better.
Guys are wired to be fixers anyway. So when we see a problem, it's right. I got to fix it. And it doesn't matter what that is, whether it's something mechanical or it's a relationship. And that's where I think a lot of guys are challenged in a relationship where things are not going the way they should, or maybe took a turn. Right? He wants to fix it, move on. And sometimes it takes some time to fix it, right?
It does. But the other part, I think, of being a wise man is knowing what's mine to fix and what's mine not to fix.
Point.
Funny story. So I was pretty overweight at one point in my life, and lost a lot of weight. I went to the gym, watched my diet. My mother was very overweight, and she would see me going to the gym and going to the Y. She said, I wish I could do that, but I can't afford a membership to the Y. And I said, okay, I can do that for you. So I got her a membership for the Y so she could go for the exercise classes, and she went one time. And she walked around, and I said, so how was it? And she said, well, I just got really intimidated, so I left. And I said, did you talk to anybody? She said, no, I just felt intimidated and left. So I let it go. And I don't know, several months later, she was talking again about working out, exercising. And so there was a women's gym that wasn't too far from where she lived. That was exclusively for women. And I said, well, I'll set you up there. And she did the same thing. She walked in, she looked around, she got intimidated by the machines, and she turned around and left. Because I'm a fixer here, so we got a problem. So I got in touch with the university in her hometown. They have a physical education major. I got in touch with one of the graduate students and said, would you be willing to meet my mother at this gym and just see where she is and set up a workout program for her? And she said, I'd love to. So they did, and it was a great connection as far as I understood. And then about a month later, I asked my mother, so how the session's going? And she said, well, I really haven't been able to match up schedules. And I'm thinking, Mom, you're retired. You don't have a schedule. and what I realized, she was getting pleasure out of talking about her problem. I was the one that was invested in fixing it.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah.
And I think that's where our innate need to fix things can cause us great angst, because it's not ours to fix. And I know sometimes with my wife, she'll start talking about a problem, and I'll come in with a solution because I've got it. And we've sort of worked it out now. And she says, so Bary, I'm going to tell you something, but I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen. So we've gotten the cue, and I've been able to honor that request and just acknowledge that sometimes she just wants somebody to listen, not to fix it, not to solve it, just to listen. And those are the kind of things we have to negotiate in relationships.
Sure. But in the case of your mom, at least you feel that you've made the attempt to help.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you a 20-second story. I'm involved with somebody, wonderful person, and she's very strong in a lot of regards. And she said there's a spider on her ceiling in her bedroom. She's like, I'm going to sleep on in the living room till I figure this out. And that was a day ago. Had literally an hour today. I got my car, drove to her place, didn't even tell her. I texted her, I didn't hear back. So how's the spider? Figured I'd see if he's still there. I'm like, you know what? I don't care. Went there, knocked on her door. She didn't answer the door. Turns out that she was sleeping because she was up late last night. And I feel like at least I made my attempt, and just it almost tongue in cheek. I'm here. Spider-Man is here. Can I get that? And that was all good. It was all good.
Yeah,
The attempt was made.
absolutely. And that's the thing of doing what we can, because we always feel better when we've done what we could.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, when I put my head on the pillow and however the day has gone, I can say I did what I could. That's a good way to end the day.
Like my mom always said, just do your best. That's it.
Yeah,
So you get to the point where hey, that's the best I could do given all the situations around. And it's funny you talk about the gym. Let's say you're at the gym, you see a woman working out, you might have a suggestion that might benefit her. Do you walk up and say, hey, I just want to share something with you? I learned this. I want to tell you. More times than not, a guy won't do that.
right,
Just the way
right.
it, no,
Because that can be misinterpreted so easily.
exactly right. Exactly right.
And I think that's what happens to us. We we err on the side of caution. And there's some wisdom in that, because the Me Too wave, I think, has passed to some extent. I think it needed to happen,
Hmm.
um, but it's not the hot button that it was. But I think the legacy of it is
The
that
empowerment has lived on.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the message to men is, if you're gonna relate to somebody you don't know, again, err on the side of caution.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a shame because sometimes you might have a valuable viewpoint, and it's I think you also have to look at the outcome. What's your goal? Are you doing it for yourself? Are you doing it to truly help somebody out? Are you trying to pick this person up? Whatever it might be, you really need to analyze that before you speak or move forward. Um, as a guy in today's society, how would you navigate that from this point on? Because it is challenging, to be a mentor. Can you at this point, let's say you're older, can you find somebody who can be your mentor?
Absolutely. Um, I so there's chronological age and there's wisdom age,
Hmm.
and there are younger people that have a lot of wisdom. Um,
Do we call them old souls?
well, I think there certainly are old souls around,
Yeah, I agree.
um, but I'm I do tend to look for older guys, and their wisdom just because of their life experience.
Hmm.
And sometimes, um, I get mentored by reading somebody's book and listening to the story from their book. It's not always a personal relationship face to face, me getting to know them getting to know me,
Wow.
but but I look for places where I can find wisdom. Um,
I'm glad you said that. That is so powerful. It really is. And do you feel that in reading their book or watching them, whatever it might be, social media, and just, call it admiring them? Yeah, I like what they've got going on. Do you almost feel that you are personally connected to them, even though you
ab-
don't know them?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I've experienced the same thing. I've worked in radio since I was 17. Haven't
Okay,
stopped, haven't stopped. And back in the 90s, I changed morning shows and did something different. And I would listen to a morning host on a station in another state, but I was able to receive it. I would even record him so I could hear what he was doing. Never even met the guy. And I felt like I knew him. And I wasn't copying him, he was inspiring me.
right.
And as years moved a little past, I reached out to him. We did start a relationship, and there were times where we would trade ideas back and forth. And
Hmm.
it was very impactful. But to the point here, you don't need to have a physical contact with somebody to have them as a mentor.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's actually one of the reasons I wrote my book, moving to your Magnificence, 101 Invitations to a Life of Passion and Joy. And they're little bite-sized pieces of invitations of things that we can do to make the world a better place and to make our lives better, how we feel about ourselves, how we function in the day.
What would you say, out of everything in your book or even in your life, your journey, your wisdom, the most important thing that we need to do if we want to feel elated, happiness, and joy on a more regular basis? And I don't know if this is male, female specific. We're talking about guys right now, but maybe just in general. What would be the first thing that comes to your mind?
It's what we talked about last week. Help an old lady across the street. When when I do something that I know the world is better because I did it, and maybe it's just minuscule.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the thing about letting somebody into traffic.
Maybe it's a guy holding a door for a woman.
And maybe it's a guy holding a door for a woman. But I also remember how challenging it was for me when a younger woman held the door for me and wouldn't go through the door until I did.
Very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like at the traffic, you stopped at the same point, you're in two separate cars. No, you go. No, you go. No, it's okay for you to go. And easier in a car, not so much when you're face to face with somebody. I almost feel uncomfortable if I let a woman have the right of way when I want to hold the door or whatever it might be. I almost feel like I'm not being I came down a notch in manhood.
Yeah, exactly. And but that gets to how we get caught up in letting somebody else's agenda, taking on somebody else's agenda.
Yeah.
And in moments like that, we always have a choice about how we're going to interpret it. And I always try, not always succeed, but I always try to put the most positive spin on it. And just let it be. She's just trying to be nice.
Yeah.
Let it go with that.
Yeah. But you know what? I think it also comes down to worrying about what somebody else thinks. Because she's kind of like, I don't really care. Hey, you go, just go. I'm fine. Come on, sir. Come on, move forward.
Yeah.
We're looking at a different camera angle where you're giving up something by letting the woman give you the right of way, where we don't need to think that. And it's if I could go back in time, if I said something to my younger self, and I tell my daughter who's 14 this all the time, don't worry about what other people think.
Yeah.
That would be my number one thing. Why did I waste so much time? I guess I needed to learn, but wasn't good. And I was overweight too. As a child, as a teen, I only lost all of that weight when I was 16 and found media. And that's I would stay at school editing and doing videos. And then food was a side note for me. But even during that journey, getting bullied and all of that, why did I worry what people thought? I didn't
Well,
need.
let me tell you my story about that. I have always been small in of stature. As a little kid, I couldn't wait to start school. My birthday's in November, and I had a great aunt who was a kind of the consummate old maid school teacher. They put me through all kinds of testing and decided that at 5 years old, I was intellectually ready for school. Couldn't wait, just loved school. I would be offended if the teacher didn't assign homework because I knew that's how you learned. So wow. I would go home and sit in front of my little chalkboard and make up homework for myself. And then in the fall of second grade, short story is that the school, it was a small community. The school caught fire, and there was just a volunteer fire department there. And I remember running across and standing in the pasture, watching the building burn. And I was close enough; I could feel the heat.
Wow!
And I watched the men from the community with their little fire truck, and then I knew, in my little 6-year-old mind, I knew that fire was way too big, and the resources of the guys the fire was gonna win. And I was just taking all of that in, and some of the big kids, now that's like the 3rd and 4th graders, came up to me and said, "Bary, why are you crying?" And I wasn't even aware that I was crying, but it was so quiet, tears that just kind of run down my cheeks. And with all sincerity, I said, we're not going to have school tomorrow. My world was going up in flames. And they all laughed at me. And yeah, we're not going to have school tomorrow. The school's burned down. We may never have school again. And they were, and I realized years later with lots of therapy that I made a decision that day. Don't let anybody know how you're feeling, because if you do, they'll laugh at you. And then in the 5th grade, I was at a school assembly. It was a whole middle school. And it was on music appreciation, and I loved music. I was excited when I walked in and saw all the instruments displayed on the stage. And the guy that was running the assembly at one point posed a question. Does anybody know the difference between a fiddle and a violin? Do you know the difference?
I know they're different instruments.
So in my mind, and I was too naive to realize this was a rhetorical question. But I raised my little 5th grade hand, and the guy called on me. And in my mind, I'm thinking a bass fiddle and a violin. And so I do all the ways they're alike and all the ways they're different. And I'm really proud of myself as I sit down. And my little butt had no sooner hit the bleacher seat than the whole assembly erupted in laughter. And the guy made fun of my answer. And what he was looking for was, it depends on the kind of music you're playing. If we're playing country and Western, we call it a fiddle. If you're playing classical, we call it a violin. But instead of giving me credit for what I knew, it became a source of amusement for the whole assembly. And so that's when I made the second decision. Don't tell anybody what you really think, because if you do, they'll laugh at you.
Yep.
So I go through life thinking there's something fundamentally wrong with me, something fundamentally wrong with my feelings, something fundamentally wrong with how I think. And so I have low self-esteem for my whole life up until my late 60s, when I finally started to come to terms with that stuff. And it's easy to say, yeah, don't let it bother you. But in some fundamental place it does. And your daughter's really fortunate because you can at least verbally keep reinforcing the message. And there's somebody there to say, hey, it's easy to fall into this trap, but don't do it.
And teenage girls now, it is a major crisis for many of them in terms of their self-esteem. And it's because of social media. It's impacting them. If you just Google it, CDC, it came out a report a couple of weeks ago. But it's interesting, Bary, we kind of went back to the beginning of what a man is now and or should be, because we're talking about not letting your feelings show. And you get different signals from women whether you should or not. And then if you don't, then you get penalized for that, I guess. And if you do, then he's crying again, he's soft, look at that. It's like we're back to square one.
Yeah, and I think you put your finger on it earlier. There comes a place where you just have to be yourself. And if the people around you don't accept it, at least I've been true to me. And if they do accept it, they're accepting the real me. They're not accepting the image, the persona.
You know what I think it comes down to? When you're not showing your real self, you're respecting others. You're not doing anything wrong, but you think you need to show them respect and show them a certain side of you or bend to make them feel more comfortable, whereby you're doing everybody an injustice. And if you're just yourself, and let's hope you're a good self, authentic, and you're not mean or anything like that, I think it's a win. Just be you. And if I'm sorry if you didn't like me holding the door for you, making your day a little bit easier, whether you're a guy or a girl, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And I think, and this is where I come from as a therapist and as a former pastor, I think that fundamentally, and not everybody agrees with me on this, we're all good people inside.
Yeah.
You talked at the beginning about there's a flame in us, and I don't think that flame ever goes out. I think it gets covered up. I think it gets buried. And I think we create layers of protection around us. It's sort of like a callus. When we do something to our hand and we make a blister, my body says, okay, I'm going to make a hard spot there so I don't get hurt in that spot in that way again.
Yep.
And I think we do that emotionally and psychologically. And I know that's what I did for most of my life. I walked around as one huge callus so that one, it was nobody could see what was really in there because I was afraid if they did, they wouldn't like it. But the other is, you're not going to hurt me that way.
Guess what? You're a bigger man for admitting that. And even at your age for admitting that. And the flame thing, I just got a picture, and just what you said, where that flame is always burning. And if you've ever seen, let's say, a tiki torch outside where there's a constant source of fuel, let's say it's propane, it's always there. The wind will blow. It looks like it goes out. It comes back on again. And the wind can blow again and comes back on again. The flame is always burning. It's always there. But sometimes, the wind kind of takes it down a little bit.
Absolutely.
You have great viewpoints. Great talking with you. And if somebody wants to find you, whether they're male or female, and kind of find their flame, their magnificence inside, they go to your website, right?
Go to my website, www.dr.baryfleet, BARYFLEET.com. You can see my TED Talk there. You can see the link to my book. There's a contact form if you want to reach out. My phone number is there. If you want to call me, text me, email me, just reach out and be in touch, and I'll see what we can do to make your life more magnificent.
Love it. Bary, fantastic talking with you.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.